Riley Curry glides silently through the family kitchen at 6:30 in the morning, her bare feet touching the cold floor like angel whispers, trying not to wake anyone. At just 12 years old, she has developed the precision of a spy, preparing two identical sandwiches, one for her school lunch and another that carries a secret purpose that not even her own parents know about. The extra sandwich disappears carefully inside her pink backpack, wrapped in aluminum foil, along with a small water bottle and, sometimes, when she manages it without being noticed, an apple or package of cookies that was left over from the previous night's snack. You can perceive that there exists something deeply magical in the kindness of a child who acts purely from love, without expectations of recognition or reward. Riley carries this kind of goodness like invisible perfume that transforms everything around her. For 3 months now, she has maintained this morning routine with the dedication of someone on a sacred mission. 3 months feeding Robert Kim, a 78-year-old man who sits on the same bench at Lakeside Park every day, staring at nothing with eyes that seem to carry the weight of all the world's sorrows. To understand why a 12-year-old girl, daughter of one of the planet's most famous athletes, decided to carry a stranger's broken heart on her shoulders, we need to go back to the day when two souls, one too pure to know despair, the other too wounded to remember hope, met on a park bench that would become sacred territory. It was a cold March afternoon when Riley was walking home after violin lessons. She always chose the longer path through Lakeside Park, not out of laziness to get home, but because she loved watching the ducks on the lake, the flowers beginning to bloom, the families having picnics on weekends. But that day, Riley noticed something different. A solitary figure sitting on the bench near the lake, hunched over himself as if trying to disappear from the world. Robert Kim was there, wearing a worn coat that had once been navy blue, frayed pants and shoes that had seen better decades. How is it possible that a 12-year-old child immediately recognizes the body language of complete abandonment? Riley possesses that rare intuition that sees through appearances and identifies raw human pain. Robert was whispering words that the wind carried to Riley. There is no more kindness in the world. There is nothing left. His hands trembled not just from the cold, but from something much deeper, the tremor of someone who had lost all reasons to continue breathing. Riley stopped a few meters from him, feeling a compassion she couldn't explain. Her 12-year-old heart didn't understand theology or philosophy, but it recognized suffering when it saw it. And Robert radiated a sadness so dense it seemed to suck the light around him. It's impossible not to feel the extraordinary courage of a child who decides to approach adults that the world teaches us to avoid. Riley walked up to Robert with the naturalness of someone who never learned to fear strangers in need. "Excuse me, sir," Riley said, with that gentle voice that only genuinely sweet children possess. "Are you okay?" Robert lifted eyes that seemed like wells dried for decades, observing the girl with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Go away, child. This is no place for people like you." "People like me?" Riley asked, tilting her head slightly with innocent curiosity. "Good people," Robert replied with a bitterness that made Riley want to cry without understanding why. "People who still believe the world makes sense. Have you ever witnessed the moment when innocence confronts the deepest cynicism and, instead of retreating, decides to embrace?" Riley experienced exactly that instinctive decision when she took from her backpack the sandwich she had made for her snack. "I brought an extra sandwich today," Riley lied with the purity of someone who lies only to avoid embarrassing someone in need. Want to share it with me? In that moment, something happened that no one expected. Robert Kim, the man who had lost faith in everything good and sacred in the world, felt a tear roll down his face for the first time in 5 years. "Girl, you don't understand," Robert whispered, his voice breaking like a dry branch. "I don't deserve kindness. I gave up believing that people like you really exist." Riley sat beside him on the bench, completely ignoring all the safety advice that every parent gives about not talking to strangers. "My name is Riley, and I think everyone deserves a sandwich when they're hungry." Robert looked at the girl, really looked, for the first time. He saw eyes that shone with a purity he had forgotten existed. He saw a smile that wanted nothing in return, that hid no hidden agenda, that simply offered love, because it was her nature to offer. Great things happen when pure hearts meet lost souls and decide that everyone deserves a second chance at kindness, Riley said, without realizing the philosophical depth of her own words. Robert accepted half the sandwich with hands trembling from something that wasn't just physical hunger. It was hunger for humanity, for connection, for evidence that not everything in the world was rotten beyond redemption. They ate in silence while watching ducks swimming in the lake. Riley talked about school, about how she liked playing violin, about her dog who always stole food from the table. Robert listened to every word as if they were musical notes he had forgotten he knew how to appreciate. When Riley needed to go home, she stood up and said simply, "Bye, Mr. Robert. See you tomorrow?" Robert watched her walk away, carrying a light that seemed to illuminate even the late afternoon shadows. For the first time in years, he didn't spend the entire night wishing he wouldn't wake up the next day. Because sometimes, angels appear disguised as 12-year-old children with extra sandwiches and hearts too big to understand why someone wouldn't believe in kindness. Riley keeps her silent promise the next day, appearing at Lakeside Park with 2 sandwiches carefully wrapped and a smile that seems to illuminate even the cloudy afternoon. Robert is sitting on the same bench, but this time he doesn't whisper words of despair to the wind. He waits for her with an expectation he hadn't felt in years. "Hi, Mr. Robert." Riley waves as she approaches, her pink backpack swaying with each animated step. "I brought peanut butter sandwich today. My mom makes the best in the world." Robert observes the girl with eyes that still carry centuries of sadness, but now also a microscopic spark of something he had completely forgotten: curiosity about what the next moment might bring. You can perceive that there is a fundamental difference between being alive and waiting to live. Robert moves from one state to the other without even realizing it, simply through the presence of a child who treats each encounter as a celebration. During the first 2 weeks, their conversations dance on the surface of safe subjects. Riley tells about violin lessons, about how she hates math but loves science, about her dog Tommy, who always tries to steal food from the table. Robert listens to every word as if it were music, rediscovering the simple pleasure of hearing someone talk about normal life. But it's in the 3rd week that Robert finally begins to lower the walls he had built around his shattered heart. "Riley," Robert says on a particularly cold afternoon, his voice carrying the weight of confessions long suppressed, "do you want to know why an old man like me is always alone on this bench? How is it possible that a simple question carries the weight of decades of accumulated pain?" Riley feels the gravity of the moment and nods with that seriousness that only children can demonstrate when they know they're about to hear something important. "I used to have a family," Robert begins, his words coming out like glass fragments that cut his own throat. I had a wife named Amanda Foster, who laughed like music, who made pancakes every Sunday morning, who believed I was the most wonderful man in the world. It's impossible not to feel the devastating tenderness of a man who still loves someone who is no longer there to receive that love. What happened to her? Riley asks, with that instinctive gentleness that makes broken people feel safe to bleed emotionally. Car accident 8 years ago, Robert whispers, and the pain in his voice makes Riley want to hug him, but she waits respectfully for him to continue. Drunk driver. She was coming back from the grocery store, buying ingredients for my birthday cake. Have you ever felt the irrational guilt of being alive when someone we love died because of us? Robert has carried this guilt like a stone in his chest for 8 years, and Riley can see this in his eyes. And I also had a son, Robert continues, each word costing him superhuman effort. Marcus was serving in Afghanistan, 22 years old, smile that lit up any room, dreamed of being a teacher when he came back from the war. The pause that follows is so heavy that Riley feels as if the air around them had become denser. He never came back, Riley. Roadside bomb 3 months after Amanda's accident. I lost my wife and my son in the same year. In that moment, something happened that no one expected. Riley, at only 12 years old, demonstrates an emotional wisdom that many adults never develop. "Mr. Robert," she says softly, placing her small hand over his wrinkled hand, "I'm so sorry that such special people had to leave, but I think they wouldn't want you to be so sad forever." How is it possible that simple words from a child have more healing power than years of therapy? Robert feels something move inside him, as if stones blocking his heart began to shift. It wasn't just that girl, Robert continues, determined now to completely empty the well of pain he carries. After they died, I discovered that my best friends, people I had trusted for decades, had stolen all the money from my company. I lost the house. I lost everything. Riley listens to every word with total attention that makes Robert feel as if his tragedies finally had a witness who genuinely cares. That's when I lost faith in everything, Riley. In God, in people, in kindness, in purpose. I began to believe that the world is just cruelty disguised as life. How many times does accumulated pain convince us that our experience defines all reality? Robert had allowed his tragedies to become his theology, but was about to discover that a child can be a more powerful spiritual teacher than any philosopher. My daddy always says that God never gives up on us, even when we give up on him, Riley responds, with that simple faith that hasn't been contaminated by adult disillusionment. And my mom says that bad people exist, but there are also good people like you. Good people like me? Robert laughs with a bitterness that still carries decades of self-hatred. Riley, I came to this park every day for months planning. He stops abruptly, realizing he's about to share something a child shouldn't hear. Planning what? Riley asks with innocent curiosity. Robert looks into the pure eyes of the girl and decides to lie to protect her. Planning to give up on everything. But you didn't give up, Riley observes with irrefutable childish logic. You're here with me, eating sandwich and telling me stories. That doesn't look like giving up to me. Have you ever witnessed the moment when a child inadvertently reveals the truth that adults are too blind to see? Riley had just shown Robert that, without realizing it, he had already begun to choose life again. Great things happen when we allow others' kindness to remind us that light still exists in the world, even when our own light seems to have gone out, Robert whispers, feeling for the first time in years something like hope germinating in his chest. Riley smiles, that pure smile that made Robert cry on the first day, and offers him the last half of her sandwich. "You know what I think, Mr. Robert? I think Amanda and Marcus sent us to meet each other, so you'd remember that there are still people who care." Robert takes Riley's small hand between his wrinkled hands and, for the first time in 8 years, truly smiles. A smile that carries not just gratitude, but something much more powerful. The discovery that maybe it's worth continuing to breathe, if only to spend another afternoon talking with an angel, disguised as a 12-year-old girl. The weeks following Robert's confession are marked by a transformation that Riley observes with a heart full of childish joy. The man who once whispered about the non-existence of kindness now laughs at her innocent jokes, tells stories from his own childhood, and even feeds the ducks in the lake with crumbs from the sandwiches they share. But Riley also notices something that her 12-year-old intuition can't completely name. Robert is different, weaker. His breathing sometimes sounds like effort. His hands shake more than normal, and there are moments when he closes his eyes for long periods, as if gathering energy just to continue talking. You can perceive that there is a difference between someone who is dying and someone who is preparing to die in peace. Robert now radiates a serenity that comes not from resignation, but from deep gratitude for having found evidence that angels still exist on earth. "Riley, my dear girl," Robert says on a June afternoon, his voice carrying a tenderness that makes her heart race without understanding why. "I need to tell you something important." Riley stops feeding the ducks and turns to him with that total attention she dedicates to everything she considers serious. Something in Robert's voice makes her stomach tighten with a premonition she can't explain. "I'm sick, little angel. Very sick." Robert speaks with that gentleness we use when we need to break pure hearts without completely destroying them. "The doctors say I don't have much time." How is it possible that words about death hurt more when they come from someone we've learned to love? Riley feels tears forming in her eyes, but tries to be brave because she realizes Robert needs her to be strong. But doctors sometimes make mistakes, right? Riley asks, with that desperate hope that only children can maintain in the face of impossible truths to accept. Robert smiles with a sweetness that carries decades of wisdom gained through losses. "Sometimes, yes, dear. But this time, I think they're right. It's impossible not to feel the cosmic cruelty of finding someone special exactly when you're about to lose them." Riley experiences this injustice as physical pain that cuts through her small chest. "But you know what's incredible, Riley?" Robert continues, taking her hands between his cold and trembling hands. "I'm not afraid. For the first time in 8 years, I'm not afraid to die." "Why not?" Riley whispers, her voice choked by tears she can no longer contain. "Because you taught me that people like you still exist in the world. You proved to me that real kindness exists, that God hasn't completely forgotten humanity." Robert speaks each word as if it were a prayer of gratitude. "I'm going to die, knowing there's hope for this world, because people like you will continue spreading light." In that moment, something happened that no one expected. Robert takes a yellowed envelope from the inner pocket of his coat. An envelope that seems to have been prepared long ago for this exact moment. "Riley, I need to give you something very important," Robert says, extending the envelope to her with hands that tremble not from weakness, but from deep emotion. "But you can only open it after I'm gone, okay?" Riley takes the envelope with the reverence of someone receiving something sacred. Her name is written on the front in careful handwriting, as if each letter had been formed with love. "What's inside?" she asks, with natural childish curiosity. "My gratitude," Robert responds simply. "Everything I would have liked to say, but that needs to be read at the right moment." Have you ever felt the weight of carrying someone's last words before even knowing they are the last? Riley holds the envelope against her chest, feeling she's carrying something more precious than any treasure. "Do you promise you'll open it?" Robert asks, his eyes shining with gentle urgency. "I promise," Riley responds with all the seriousness a 12-year-old can muster. They spend the rest of the afternoon talking about everyday things, about how the park flowers are more beautiful, about the ducks that already recognize Riley and swim to her expecting food, about how summer promises to be special, but there's a quality of farewell in every word, as if both knew they were creating their last memory together. When it's time for Riley to go home, Robert hugs her. A long, tight hug that carries all the love a grandfather could feel for a granddaughter of the heart. "Thank you for saving me, my little angel," he whispers in her ear. "Thank you for proving to me that miracles still exist in this world." Riley walks home holding the envelope and a strange feeling in her chest, as if she were carrying something heavier than paper and ink. She doesn't know she's carrying the last words of a man who found peace through her kindness. 3 days later, Robert Kim doesn't appear on the park bench. Riley waits for 2 hours, feeding the ducks alone, her heart tightening with anxiety that grows with each passing minute. On the 4th day, a nurse from the local shelter looks for Riley in the park and gently tells her that Robert had died peacefully in his sleep, smiling, whispering words about angels and kindness until his last breath. How many times do we witness the death of someone who managed to find peace exactly because someone loved them unconditionally? Robert departed, not as the broken man who arrived at the park months ago, but as a restored soul who rediscovered faith in humanity through a 12-year-old girl. Great things happen when we allow our light to touch other hearts, even without knowing that this light might be exactly what someone needs to find peace. Riley whispers to herself, remembering Robert's words about angels that really exist. That night, alone in her room, Riley opens the envelope with hands that tremble with anticipation and pain. She has no idea she's about to discover something that will forever change her understanding of the power of human kindness. Riley is sitting on her bed, surrounded by the silence of the night, holding Robert's envelope between hands that tremble with a mixture of longing and anticipation. The soft light from the lamp illuminates, her face still swollen from crying so much since learning of his death. With reverent care, she opens the envelope and unfolds pages written by hand in careful handwriting of someone who knew each word would be precious. The letter begins simply, "My dear Riley, my little angel." You can perceive that there are moments in life when words written by someone we love become more sacred than any religious text. Riley feels this sanctity as her eyes scan each line written with paternal love. As I write this letter, you are sleeping in your warm and safe home, not knowing that you saved the life of a bitter old man who had lost all hope. I need to tell you the truth, my dear girl, because you deserve to know the miracle you performed without even realizing it. Riley feels her heart accelerate, sensing she's about to discover something that will forever change how she understands the last 3 months. On the day we met, March 15th, I wasn't on that bench just because of sadness or loneliness. I was there to say goodbye to the world forever. I had planned everything carefully. It would be my last afternoon watching the sunset on the lake, before departing definitively. How is it possible that words about planned suicide hurt more when we discover we were the reason for someone to choose life? Riley feels the world spin around her as she comprehends the magnitude of what she's reading. I had lost everything that mattered, Riley. Family, faith, hope, reason to breathe. I spent 8 years convinced that no real kindness existed in the world anymore, that humanity was just cruelty in disguise. I was wrong about everything. It's impossible not to feel the crushing weight of discovering that your casual kindness saved a life that was minutes away from ending. Riley reads each word through tears that flow like rivers of devastating understanding. When you approached that bench with your pure smile and offered half your sandwich, something impossible happened in my dead heart. For the first time in 8 years, I felt something besides pain. I felt hope. I felt that maybe, just maybe, there were still angels on earth. In that moment, something happened that no one expected. Riley understands that all the sandwiches, all the conversations, all the friendship they built began as an unconscious act of salvation that she didn't even know she was performing. You will never know, my little angel, that you saved me not just that day, but every day that followed. Every sandwich you brought, every story you told, every smile you gave was like oxygen to a soul that was suffocating. You taught me that pure kindness still exists, that God hasn't completely abandoned this world. How many times do we perform miracles without knowing, save lives without realizing, become angels without understanding our own power? Riley experiences this revelation as a spiritual earthquake that redefines everything about purpose and kindness. During our 3 months of friendship, you gave me back faith in humanity. More than that, you gave me back faith in God. How could He not exist if He created creatures like you? How could the world be lost if it still produces hearts so pure? Riley can no longer read through the tears that blur her vision. She stops, breathes deeply, and continues with the determination to honor every word Robert wrote for her. I am dying in peace, Riley, and that is a miracle only you could perform. I will depart, knowing there is hope for this world, because people like you will continue spreading light without even realizing the power they carry. You were my last and greatest blessing. The letter continues for 2 more pages, but it's the last sentence that makes Riley collapse completely. Thank you for proving to me that angels exist, my dear girl. They are 12-year-old children with pure hearts who share sandwiches with strangers and save souls without even knowing. Love always, trust always, always be the light that you are. The world needs you. Your grandfather of the heart, Robert Kim. Riley cries like she has never cried in her life, not just from sadness, but from an emotion so complex it has no name. It's gratitude mixed with responsibility, love mixed with longing, pride mixed with deep humility. Have you ever felt the exact moment when you understand that your life has a greater purpose than you ever imagined? Riley experiences this epiphany as a cosmic revelation that illuminates her entire future. The next morning, Riley tells her parents about Robert, about the secret sandwiches, about the friendship that changed 2 lives. Steph and Isha Curry cry along with their daughter as they read the letter, understanding that they raised not just a kind girl, but a force of transformation that saved a human soul. Riley, Steph says through tears of paternal pride, do you understand what you did? You literally saved someone's life by just being yourself. Riley and Robert's story goes viral when the family decides to share it to honor his memory and inspire others. Steph's video telling the story on Instagram receives 50 million views in 1 week. 12-year-old Angels becomes a global movement of children doing acts of kindness. Great things happen when a pure child proves to the world that angels don't have wings. They have pink backpacks with extra sandwiches and hearts too big to understand why someone wouldn't believe in kindness. Riley became living evidence that a simple act of love can save not just one life, but inspire millions of others. 6 months later, on the bench where it all began, there's a small plaque that says, "In memory of Robert Kim, who found faith through a child's kindness, and Riley Curry, who proved that angels exist among us." Riley visits the bench every week, no longer with sandwiches for Robert, but with fresh flowers and stories about all the people who were inspired by his letter. Because sometimes the most powerful words are those written by souls who found light through hearts too pure to understand they were saving lives. And every time someone reads that letter, a new kindness is born in the world, a new life is touched, a new proof that great things happen when we decide to be light. Even when we don't know that someone is dying in darkness, waiting exactly for that light to choose to live one more day.